Well, hello, everybody. I'm James Allen Wilfred Schmidt. Some people think that the AW stands for author writer, but no, it's Allen Wilfred. So anyway, a little about myself. I was born and raised on a farm at Crow Lake. Everybody knows what Crow Lake is, right?
No.
Oh, well, really? Oh, how weird. It's only by the edge of the earth, or at least you could see it from there. If you go to Weston Springs and you go over to the White Lake Road that cuts over to White Lake, about halfway there, around where the windmills are now, there's a lake you got to go around, and that's where I was as a boy. I grew up on a farm there in that little area. And my life was very, very sheltered. You know, I had no idea what the world was about. To me, it was a great big backyard, bigger than any kid could ever imagine. You know, I could go anywhere and wander around wherever I wanted to wander. And life was good, you know. I actually did not see my first person of color until I was, about an 8th grader. I went to the state fair and there was a young man that was a black man, and I stared at him and I stared at him and I wanted to touch his hair because it looked like steel wool, but I knew better. You know, I had manners, but it was, you know, I mean, life was different. You know, pretty sheltered. And then all of a sudden, boom, went to high school, of course, and in Weston Springs, graduated there in '69. But after that, everything changed drastically. A boy that had never really been away from home very long went into the service. We were stuck on an airplane. We had incriminating physicals. We went to boot camp where they screamed and hollered at us and treated us like squirrels, worms. They had all kinds of names for us. And that first morning, the alarm clock was a trash can kicked down the middle of the aisle at 5 in the morning saying, get your, what you call it, out of your bunks, you know? That was our wake-up call. And from then on, it was hit the road running and do everything you're told and don't question anything. You know, ours is but to do or die. How's that go?
Into the valley of death.
Yeah, and we shall not question why. You just do what you're told. You know, so the service was a big change, and I got introduced to different people, different cultures, and everything like that. It was quite fascinating to me, actually, to meet all these different people and the different foods. I ate my first taco at the zoo in San Diego, you know. So that was pretty good. Now I love burritos, tacos, all those things. I go to the Taco John's quite a bit, you know. I love that. I love pizza. I love, you know, all those different kinds of foods. Thank heavens people are different than just me, or it would have been meat and potatoes for the rest of my life. Well, anyway, I went off to Vietnam, and I was on the gun line in the Navy, 2 different tours, and that was quite an experience. So it's kind of like being in a floating prison. You're stacked 3 high where you sleep. You're either working, sleeping, or eating. One of those 3 things. You're on watch, you know. So the schedule was pretty rigid, but sleep wasn't a guarantee, because in the middle of the night, they'd scream at us that there's a helicopter coming that needs refueled. So we'd all have to get up and go out there, and they would drop a hose down, and we'd hook it up to a device on the back of the ship. And then we'd have to be there to guide this wire thing back and forth to make sure that everything stays secure. It was the same thing for taking on fuel. We had a great big thing go from one ship to the other, great big hose. We had a great big thick a cable that would run across on a king pole to one ship to the other to send supplies over and everything like that. Well, anyway, that was quite a change from chickens and cows. So anyway, but one of the highlights of my time was I went to the roller skating rink in Long Beach, California, called the Hippodrome. And I went with a friend of mine, and I could hardly skate. You know, I was just learning how to roller skate. And lo and behold, we were going around, and I heard this click, 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 bang behind me. And in slides this young lady right in between my friend Dave and I. And I reached down and I pick her up. And eventually, as time goes on, she became my wife. So what I tell people is she fell for me right off the bat. So anyway, yeah, we ended up having 2 children, Christy and then Brian. Now we got grandkids, 3 of them. So yeah, that was pretty good. And life was pretty good until later on, she wasn't feeling well, so we went into an appointment, and they said, well, you got cancer, they told her. And she was not surprised. She was one that could kind of tell things a little bit in advance. She kind of had these feelings about things. And I don't want to say too much because it's kind of in the book of how that came about. But it hit me like a ton of bricks, you know, that she had 2 good years, pretty good years. She even worked most of them until finally a few months before she was in hospice. And then finally she was gone. And that was one of the darkest times in my life, you know, losing her. We'd been married 36 years. And it was very, very difficult. So that began the first journey, the journey of grief. And in the journey of grief, it's not an easy journey at all. And there's times I just kind of wanted to give up. You know, there's a little more about that in the book also, about me wanting to give up. But needless to say, I decided to go to a support group. And the first group I went to, actually, Jackie over there behind us, I went to that group first, and I found out that, man, this is a lot of help. But part of the problem was men do not like to go to support groups. They want to tough it up, man it up. And we come from a generation where big boys don't cry and all that kind of stuff, which is garbage. You know, we're told to hold our emotions. You know, the definition of what a man was not necessarily good, because it basically would tear us apart. But in a support group, you could be yourself, and you were around other people that basically have experienced that same journey. Maybe not exactly like yours, but everybody there was going through some kind of a grief process. So I learned a lot from that, and I will actually take you into a support group in my book, and you can get an idea what it's a little bit like, because fear of the unknown is another fear in itself, not knowing what it's like, So a lot of the book has to do with dealing with grief, especially I target men, because men are a lot less likely to go than women are. But let's be honest, guys, we need just as much help as they do. If we want to man up to the fact that we need help, So after a while, I found out that I was getting tugged from the Lord, I would say, telling me, Jim, this doesn't need to be a waste. Her loss of life doesn't need to be wasted. Wouldn't it be nice if you helped others walk through the same journey? And it took a lot of soul searching, because that meant that I had to go back through some own painful things myself to be able to do so. But I found that by being one of the few guys that was involved, guys felt more comfortable with being there than just a room full of women. And they can relate to me, And so ever since then, I've been involved. And now I'm with Grief Share. I don't know if you've ever heard of Grief Share, but Grief Share at this time during, they don't have meeting together as much anymore because of the COVID and everything. But if you Google Grief Share and they have some online programs that you can get and some information that you can send for. And so that's better than nothing at all. So I encourage people to do that. I have about close to 10 years experience with being a facilitator. And that kind of qualifies me, I feel, to be able to relate to others. And in writing this book, I got to thinking, well, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a counselor, but when I pick up their books, there's lots of facts and lots of figures and lots of nice big words. And it's some of them are more a book to sleep by. Wouldn't it be better if they heard from somebody that was a plain, ordinary guy that talks their language and takes them through a number of different scenarios and show them how I more or less walk through the valley of grief? And if they relate, that's great. It's not just for men, it's for everybody. There's things that we learn in these support groups to be able to, like tools to help us through. We can have what's called triggers, where we hear a certain song, eat a certain food, a certain smell, something will just attack us, like ambush us. And we just feel this overwhelming grief. And there are ways that a person can be able to prepare for that and be ready in case that happens. And that's why opening up and talking and being honest with yourself and honest with others and everything really helps. Later on, in Grief Share and in these grief things, one of the things they have us do is journal. We write down every day how we feel, what we're going through, and then down the road, we can look back to see if we've improved, if we've gotten better. If you don't do that, you don't really know if you improved. And when you're farther down the road, say a year or so, and you look back what you felt, you could say, yeah, it's not quite that like that anymore. So anyway, journaling, I had a number of notes and so on. Well, then, talking with people and looking around and all these different experiences that I've had in the process, I was hinted at basically, why don't you write a book? Well, there's a problem with writing a book. When I was a boy, I went to school, started in the first grade. I couldn't learn to read. I had a terrible time. I couldn't even write my name. When I wrote my name, it turned out backwards. I had what's called mirror vision. You could take the word Jim and hold it up to the mirror and it's perfect. I had dyslexia. So anyway, with that, you see kind of things backwards and everything. My reading is very scattered. When I read even now, sometimes I struggle, but I read a little anyway because it helps me. But I learned how to skim read to get me through school. I learned my own process of getting faster with that. And I made it through a semester of college. And then I went to a trade school where I learned how to build, construction, carpentry. Then I ended up being a maintenance man, which I liked very much. But anyway, one time, one of the things that we learn is we have to kind of recreate ourselves. When you lose a spouse, it's like half of you died too. You're just kind of half there. And you got to do something to fill in. And so you recreate yourself. It can be with hobbies, other different things. And I became a member of the photo club. I got into this writers group, the James River Writers Group, and I was introduced to that by Bill Russell. Bill Russell was the original founder of the writers group. Then Sally Ann kind of picked up from there. So he approached me about it. And I said, oh, come on now. I can't do that. Can't isn't a word we should use because we'll be surprised if we really apply ourselves. We can do more than we thought. Don't ever let a disability stop you from doing something because there's always a way that you can do it with the disability. So that's one thing I'd say. I first started out with poetry and I did end up getting a poem in the South Dakota magazine about trees. And, that was pretty fascinating to actually see my own poetry in the state magazine. And then I needed, It's gonna do it in 5 more minutes.
All right.
Yeah, you just hit cancel.
Oh, just turn the volume way down.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, I have diabetes and that tells me I should give myself a shot, but I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm
You go 10 more minutes.
I'll be fine. Anyway, so the thing about grief is I want to encourage people to know that when they first get into grief, it seems impossible. It seems dark, and it doesn't seem like life's ever going to get any better. But like the cover of the book right there, if you look at that, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Eventually, if you work at it, you can be able to get through. And I'm not saying everything's going to be perfect, because grief is a lifetime adventure. But towards the end of it, you can have pleasant thoughts about your deceased loved ones. That's more of a treasure than a drudgery. And that can come in time. So I encourage you to stick with it and work with it. Okay, from my book, I'm going to read a little bit about some of the stuff that's in my book. Okay. I can't move. Sitting in the parking lot, staring at the entryway, my feet felt glued to the floorboard. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were turning white. I can't do this, I told myself. There was still time to back out of this grief support meeting. A low, gruff voice from within said, "You have to do this. You made a promise. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here." I replied, and I pounded on my fist on the steering wheel. Looking around, I wondered if anybody had seen or heard me. They probably would have thought I was nuts. Maybe I was. You're a coward. Sometimes these inner voices could be so loud that they came out verbally. So that was one part of it. One thing about this book is it's two journeys at the same time. One of them is the journey of grief. And to help ourselves with it, my son and I decided to walk the Mickelson Trail as a kind of a way to have something to look forward to as a therapy. So we walked 109 miles in 4 days. And you'll walk along with us on this journey. There will be good times and there will be hard times, just like grief itself. You know, one of them is very physical and one of them is very emotional. The trouble with this journey on the trail was we didn't only have to carry the luggage and stuff or the stuff in our backpacks to do the trip. We had the emotional load also to carry with us. So it's like we were carrying twice the weight. And you'll see as you go along the different things that we had to go through. Now, something from the trail. Okay. What a day, right, Brian? We climbed a gulch. We walked through a mountain. Yes, it was an incredible day, but I'm ready to call it a night. Even though we had a good day on the trail, as I settled into my tent, that nagging, uneasy gut feeling came back to me. Things are going, thank you. Okay. Okay. Let's see. But I really, let's call it a night. Even though we had a good day on the trail, I felt, as I settled in my tent, that nagging, uneasy gut feeling came back to me. Things were going too smoothly. Tragedy is like a mountain lion following us, just waiting for the right time to attack. We may not have known what calamity awaits Brian and I, but I could feel something was about to move in on us. So stay tuned to what happens. I love cliffhangers. I remember Laura Ingalls Wilder, a lot of times, the last chapter of her book always had like a cliffhanger so many times. And the teacher would say, wait till tomorrow to find out what happens. You know? So I like that process. And I kind of like to do that in the book. Okay, now,
You got about 4 minutes left.
yes,
You got about 4 minutes.
about 4 minutes. Okay, first of all, if you can buy the book from me, it's on Amazon. You could use the title. It's also in Wolsey at the new Buzz Inn, Ward Store in DeSmet, Sweetgrass in Weston Springs. And anyway, yeah. And if you really like the book, could you please send a thing into Amazon to tell them you like it? I mean, I got 5 stars right now, but only 1 review. So anyway, any questions real quick, Mike?
I remember your poetry, The Empty Chair, and I thought that was such a moving poetry piece that you did. Is that in the book at all?
The one about the ship?
No, it's The Empty Chair. It's like
Okay, well, the ship is at the end of the book. And that's one of the ones I had at the state fair and I did well on. So I concluded with poetry about a ship. So. Anybody else?
There was no questions online, but Susan says, sorry for your loss, but what a wonderful way to use your experience to help others. Thank you for sharing.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you, everybody. And thank you to the library for allowing us to do this. And to the writers group for everything they do. And, you know, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you guys. So thank you. Yeah, I shut it off. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I never stopped to think that it's supposed to, it's getting myself shot.
Probably gonna be under the top.
When I travel down the road, I usually stand at the moon.
All right, we are on our last author of the day. And I'll just tell you now that we have plenty of cookies and cupcakes if anyone wants to take some home afterwards. But I would like to introduce Heidi Herman.
Thank you so much. It is awesome seeing so many people come out and not just to support one author that they knew, but to stay and hear all the different stories. Thank you so much to Huron Public Library for hosting this event and bringing us together. And I know I can't be the only one. It is so inspiring to hear everyone's stories and to really learn where all this inspiration for this comes from. Some of it's from personal experience, some of it's from history and, you know, learning about where we came from, or just that little spark of imagination that just takes us to a whole new level. And that is exactly my story as well. My mom was Icelandic. She was born in 1925 in Reykjavik, Iceland. During World War II, she met my father at a USO dance, and she didn't speak English. He didn't speak Icelandic, but somehow they had some hand gestures and they had a dance, and he motioned for her to come back to the next dance. And during that dance, he went like this and she went like this. And they were married for 25 days short of 70 years when he passed away. When she was 88 years old, she took a correspondence course to learn how to do children's literature. And she wrote a book. This was originally Monster Worm, Hidden People, Fond Memories of Iceland. And she retitled it Growing Up Viking. And this was a book about growing up in 1935 Iceland and these strange hidden people and a monster worm and a land with no Santa Claus. They had these 13 trolls of Christmas. And it just, anybody who read this is like, wow. I mean, I knew Iceland, it's like this little country island in the middle of nowhere, right somewhere. My mom used to say when she first came to this country that people would ask where she's from based on her accent, and she'd be like, oh, I'm from Iceland. And she was just deer in the headlights, glazed look, kind of like, it's a country, I don't know where it is exactly, but, and she wanted to share what it was like, the culture of Iceland. And one thing that really came out of that book was inspiring me to kind of pick up that mantle and write some children's books based on the folklore and mythology. Now, I'm a huge mythology fan. I mean, I loved all the Roman gods and the Greek gods and, you know, this wonderful story about making wings and flying into the sun, or, you know, oh my goodness, why that little spot on your ankle hurts so much. And all this is based in mythology, right? And it's wonderful because you find out that every culture has their history in their books. And that's how it's passed down, and that's how it's taught, and the philosophy. One thing that I love about Iceland, you're going to hear me say that over and over again, it's going to be a different thing every time, because there's about 100 things I love about Iceland. They have what's called a jólabókaflóðið. Jólabókaflóðið is Yule book flood. So it's the Christmas book flood, and it starts about this time of year. And this big catalog goes out to every house in the country, and it's from the publishers. And they give you a list of every book that's available. And you go through and you highlight what books you want for Christmas that year. And then that's your Christmas list. So it's the Christmas book flood. And I just can't think of a better way to celebrate Christmas than going and getting a book. But based on that, my first book was a Christmas book that told the story of the 13 trolls of Christmas, because they don't have a Santa Claus. And this is a story that actually is one of the oldest Christmas stories in the world. It dates back to about 800. Snorri Sturluson first wrote this story down. It was an oral tale. He wrote it down in about 1400 when he was starting to work on all the Icelandic sagas. But we had a lot of fun with that. And then I wrote another one where the Yule lads, these trolls of Christmas, kind of bebop around and interfere with Santa Claus. And I brought them into that. My mom and I started traveling around to Scandinavian festivals and talking to different people. And we decided people needed to know more about the culture. So we co-authored a cookbook together. And that was a lot of fun. And then the next one, she had come up here because I started dating a man here in South Dakota. And so she came to visit me once, and we live in Lake Preston, which is about 10 miles from Schmidt and the whole world of Laura Ingalls Wilder. And my mother had never read anything that having to do with Little House on the Prairie, and she was absolutely enamored. Somebody gave her the entire collection, and she sat down and read all of them, and she loved it so much. She rewrote her memoir into a Little House on the Prairie style. And I love this because you can tell by the difference in the sizes of these books. This is made for adults. It's got references to World War II and German U-boats and some of the politics that was going on in the country then. But Viking kids don't cry. That just pares it down to the actual experience of growing up in Iceland. And that's actually an expression that her grandfather used to say to her. Viking kids don't cry. They can yell, scream, stomp their feet, jump up and down, but don't you dare cry. It's a stiff upper lip, right? When we were settling America, that used to be, pull your stuff up by your bootstraps and stiff upper lip and keep going. And that's that Viking spirit that you can make it and you can continue on. And that's something that I was really captured by, and it led to my next book, which was a collection of folklore from Iceland, sort of like Grimm's fairy tales. I collected 25. A third of them had been previously published, last updated 200 years ago. So it was like reading Shakespeare, let me tell you. I find the story in there somewhere. And then I traveled to Iceland several times and I collected some of the oral stories. And then I went out and researched to find a few more. So that's where that collection comes from. And it really struck me that the philosophy of a culture really is reflected starting with your folklore. If you look at English, European folklore, the princess is always beautiful. The prince is always handsome. Anyone who's bad is going to be ugly. The queen might be ugly, then she's bad. If she's beautiful, she's probably a good queen. And you have to slay the dragon. Always slay the dragon because he's bad, right? And that is the basis of how you interact with everything. And one of my favorite stories in the folklore is about these villagers that lived on a fjord, and there was an island out in the middle, and they had to take their boats out there and climb to the top, rough crags, and that's where about 1 million birds nested. And to this day, there's still about 1 million seabirds that nest there, and they would lower themselves down on baskets and they would harvest the eggs. And so they were out there one year and they were lowering themselves down on their baskets, and all of a sudden the men were falling into the ocean and perishing. And so they pull the ropes up and they were all cut. They weren't frayed, they were new ropes and they were being cut. And they said, my goodness, obviously we have a troll problem. So they wouldn't lower anybody else down. And the local parish relied on some of that food. And they're going like, guys, come on, you gotta have, send in the eggs. We need this. We can't do anything. There's trolls. So the parish priest came out and he went up there and they were lowering him down on a basket. And he was throwing holy water on the cliffs and everything. And they had put holy water on his rope to try to protect him. And he got 3/4 of the way around. And then all of a sudden, this green hand comes out with a sharp knife and starts sawing through his rope. And he's looking down and he's throwing holy water on it. And it's hissing and sizzling. And all of a sudden, he hears a voice that says, "Bless no more, Father. Even the wicked need a place to be." That's a good point. That's a good point. So he got them to pull him back up and he said, okay, here's the deal. 3/4 has already been consecrated. That's where we will collect eggs. This part here, that's going to be for the trolls. And they renamed that Pagan Crag. And to this day, you don't want to hike there. That's where the trolls live. And that particular, there's a number of the folklore and the fairy tales that are in here that really strike me. But to me, that really encapsulates the whole, get along with your environment. Get along, even if you're enemies. I mean, there's nothing worse than a troll. I mean, that is like the epitome of a monster. And yet, they found a way to coexist and to just get along. And I think that is so impressive with the folklore and learning about another culture, that it really enhances your own life and your own understanding of the world and how you interact with others. So that's one thing that I really loved about going through this process with my mom. And then every year or so, each one of us would come out with another book. She wrote a young adult book. She loved the idea that Jules Verne, Journey to the Center of the Earth, was based on an actual cave in Iceland. You can actually go there and go down in that cave that inspired him. But when she read that book, she always wondered what happened to that Icelandic guide. you know? So in her book, it is about the two grandchildren and their best friend, grandchildren of that Icelandic guide who has disappeared. And now they go on an adventure into outer space, into the planet that now is home to all those Norse gods that disappeared from the world. And she just kind of takes kids on this whole fantasy adventure about the Nordic gods. And I love having that inspiration around me. She lived with me until about 6 months before her passing. As we went around and talked to different people, one thing that always struck them was, here's this lady that didn't even start writing books until she was 88 years old. And then she, every couple of years, she'd come out with another book and come out with another book. And we would travel around to Scandinavian events, and she loved doing library events. We did a lot of those. And it always struck everyone to say, wow, where do you get your inspiration from? Where do you get your energy from? I mean, how do you keep going and doing this? And privately, she would always say, well, I never want to answer that question because I really believe it's my Viking blood, you know? And that would just be like mean to say that to somebody because not everybody has it. So that's not really good motivation for other people. But I felt like she could still really do something to motivate. So I was really thrilled when she turned 93. She wanted to undertake this inspirational journey and do 93 new things before she turned 94 years old, just to show that you're never too old to do something new. And so we did that. And as soon as that year was done, she wanted to write a book about that experience. And it was really cool because there was so much documentation that we did in this world of social media. We Instagrammed a whole bunch of photos. And one thing that was really amazing that she did during those 93 things was a television interview with Icelandic television. They wanted to do a follow-up on war brides and how women from Iceland immigrated to a foreign country and what their experience was. But after they met her and they got to know her a little bit, her special changed completely. It ended up being a motivational, inspirational thing on how to stay active. As a matter of fact, she was 93 years old. We were in Iceland and they sent a film crew out because she wanted to go paragliding. And that was actually part of this special where she's out paragliding. And the funny thing about it is that was her third experience. The first time she was also 88. When one of my sisters kind of gave her a birthday gift of a, what do you call it, tandem, and to celebrate her finishing her school course. And she loved that. And then a few years later, we went paragliding in Iceland, and I was with her at that point in time. So I went, hated it, absolutely hated it, swore I'd never want to do it again. It was one of the, I don't even like roller coasters. So I'm up there in that moment, I'm just hanging on, just kind of, you ever have that moment where you just hate something so much, you just grit your teeth and it's just, I want to be done, just be done, be done, be done. And that's how it was. And yet she loved it so much. 2 years later, darned if I didn't find myself back up there again in the exact same, I just want this to be over. And if you watch that television special real close, when she lands and they've got this microphone in her face and they're filming her and she's like all excited and she's like, oh, this is the best thing ever. In the background, you see me come down, drop. But the point is, you just go out there and do it. And whether it's Jim's journey in grief or whether it's, you know, Hazel's journey in doing her research and, you know, different ones who have talked about, you know, this is not ever what I wanted to do in life, but I had to do it. I had to stay in the buggy. I had to stay the course. I had to keep going and do it. But that's what life is all about, you know, and whether it's the process of writing the book, or as readers, we go through the adventure of reading the book and we're right there with the author and it's just wonderful. it's fabulous what we can learn, what we can experience, and how we can grow as people. So I am looking forward to, I keep saying, I think I'm done writing Icelandic books. My new focus now is women's fiction. Each one of my stories has this little hint of Icelandic culture in there. I'll always throw a little Iceland in everything. But I really am starting this journey into a whole new chapter of speaking to women's fiction, especially transitional times, protagonists over the age of 50, and all those wonderful things that we experience, whether it's loss or changes in career or changes in life or whatever it might be. That's the next adventure that I'm going to have. So yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity today. And if anybody has any questions about Iceland or writing or folklore or the current volcano in Iceland that has been ongoing erupting since March.
Oh, hold on.
And I do have all these books with me today. I believe the library has copies of all of mine and my mother's books. They're available from Barnes and Noble, local bookstores, Amazon, and most of them are available in ebook or paperback.
So Heidi, if we just to look for them, since we don't remember all the titles,
I know.
if we just looked up your name as an author on Amazon, then it
Yes.
would list all the books, including your mother's, right? Or it would link to the.
It should link to hers, yes, because we do have 3 books that are co-authored.
Okay.
The book about her 93 new experiences, we were in the process of writing that when she passed away, and it did change a little bit. Her book ended up being more of a photo journal, lots of photos in there and little snippets. Some things that she only wrote a sentence or 2, and she was going to come back to those later. Others, she wrote a few paragraphs, but I think we were talking earlier, when I had finished that book, it actually ended up being a big mess, because when I sent it to my editor, she's like, no, because you have your mom's journey, her experiences, her vitality on life, and then you have this view from your point of view on how she inspired you and how you're encouraging other people to live a life like that. She said, you really have 2 books. So I had to split it apart. And so we have one book that's a photo journal of my mom's 93 new things that she did. And then On with the Butter, that is an Icelandic expression. It's Afram með smorðið, which literally means on with the butter. It's an expression to move forward or just keep going. And it's very motivational. And in that I have probably 200 different ideas on how you can increase activity, vitality, learn something new, do something new, take a chance in life. So, and yeah, with all of this, I could not choose anything to actually read. So, and I can't read the clock either. How am I on
10
time?
minutes.
I'm sorry?
You still have 10 minutes.
I have 10 minutes? Okay.
Both of those little books are great gift books to get.
They are wonderful.
60th year birthday, 70th birthday, too many people dig their graves when they retire, and that's not the time to do it. So.
Yes. I'll go ahead and read a little bit from On with the Butter. This is a chapter on be bold, be willing to take a chance. And in this, I put a lot of quotes because, when I was young, one of my most favorite mantras that I would tell myself every morning, learn from the mistakes of others, because you can't possibly live long enough to make them all yourself. So in this book, each chapter has at least 2 quotes from really smart, famous people. And I just quoted them because I couldn't say things nearly as good as what they could. And for this chapter, obviously, I have an Icelandic proverb in here. The bold and the generous have the best lives. And I just think that's wonderful. Why is riding on a roller coaster fun? Why do some people seek the adrenaline rush of paragliding or ziplining? The heights, the speed, even feeling out of control can be scary in a good way. As we get older, activities we've always enjoyed can seem mundane or even boring. And when that happens, it might be time to take a chance and try something new, even if that something is a little scary. Science tells us that the adrenaline is the body's natural response to fear, and chemicals released along with the adrenaline can give us a feeling of euphoria. Some people are quick to embrace this excitement, while others are more likely to hesitate. My mother was always one to embrace. Maybe it was her Scandinavian heritage and the innate Viking spirit that made her so adventurous, but whatever the reason, she always welcomed every opportunity and raised all 10 of us to welcome it too. Now, early in the book, you find out I am the youngest of 10 children that my mother had. Once, during a family reunion in Colorado, we eagerly rafted the white water of Upper Animas River. Mom was 70, but she pulled her weight with the paddle, helping to ensure that her boat didn't capsize in the strong rapids. She thrived on thrills, so none of us raised an eyebrow when 18 years later, one of my sisters bought her a tandem paragliding experience for her 88th birthday. I have to admit, I did raise an eyebrow when I watched her and her instructor performing mid-air flips, but she loved every minute of it. It was no surprise when Mom made arrangements to paraglide again 2 years later, this time in Iceland. She was giddy with excitement, and the excitement was infectious, so I agreed to go with her and try paragliding myself. It's an interesting thing sometimes to think about what we're afraid of or intimidated by. I'm comfortable speaking to audiences of several hundred people and even relish the excitement of whitewater rafting, but paragliding was an entirely different experience. My discomfort with heights and the sensation of unfettered mid-air flight combined to make the experience one I'd hesitate to repeat. For some people, being bold means facing a physical challenge or fear. Others are more apprehensive about speaking in public or performing in front of a group. Regardless the source of your fears, there are benefits to facing and overcoming them. I may never go paragliding again, but I'm glad I did it at least once, and I cherish the experience. The memory of the flight, the amazing views from that height, and the camaraderie of having shared the adventure with my mom are all part of why I don't regret doing it. In addition to helping us become more self-confident, overcoming fears can help us be more empathetic to others with similar apprehensions and open a whole new world of events and activities. If you're uncomfortable with public speaking, volunteering to read for Children's Story Hour as an audience, children are a lot more forgiving of nervousness and can help build your confidence about taking on bigger challenges later. If the idea of performing feels intimidating, consider auditioning for a small role at your local theater, or take on a support role like serving as an usher or working on set design. Community theater groups open up new doors for socializing and grow your circle of friends. No matter what fears or uncertainties are limiting our activities, we can confront them and often surmount them by starting small. If you've always wanted to take a cruise, but you're afraid of water, take the first step by signing up for swimming lessons or water safety. If you're not comfortable asking that special someone out on a first date, invite them to join you for a walk or a cup of coffee. There's an abundance of benefits when we resolve to be bold and take the first step. Remember, the mind is as resilient as the body. To become stronger physically, we follow a workout and gradually increase the difficulty. Our minds can work the same way. Start small and build the challenge gradually. You might find yourself enjoying many activities you never thought you'd even try. And if your greatest public speaking engagement is reading for story time, or you decide to stay off the main stage, being bold will expand your world in delightfully unexpected ways.
I grew up in Lake Preston.
Uh-huh.
Are you treated like a star there?
No. I am not. I work with the Chamber of Commerce, I do Meals on Wheels, I attend church there locally, but that's about it.
I see.
Well, thank you all so much. This has been a fabulous day, I'm sure, not just for me, but for all the authors here. And again, thank you so much to the library for allowing us this opportunity.
Question.
Yes, yeah.
I remember learning somewhere about Icelandic sweaters being so special.
Yes,
Is that?
this is an Icelandic sweater. Yes.
Describe it, why it's special.
One of the things that makes it special is the Icelandic sheep and how they were adapted to live in Iceland. There's actually 2 layers to their wool, their fleece, and it's water repellent. So that's one thing, a lot of the sheep in North America and some other parts of the world, as soon as this would get wet, I mean, it would get colder, but this, if it gets wet, it actually beads up and it doesn't absorb into it. So it's very, very warm, very warm.
Well, I just want to thank everybody for coming today. I'm hoping to have a similar event this spring. Fingers crossed that we don't get a bunch of snow. But thank you all for coming. And if you are interested in more library programs, there are calendars with the November events by the door on your way out. So have a good day.
Thank you.